Welcome to Critical Thinking, Unit 7, Concepts. Today we'll ask, what is truth? Is truth created or discovered? And we'll talk about media bias. Now, I'm not going to repeat your required reading from the textbook and study guide. I'll give you additional principles to understand them better and to make things more simple. What is truth? Let's talk about truth theories. We'll start with something familiar. Here's a claim or a proposition. The Earth is a sphere and is not flat. This claim or proposition or idea or belief claims something is true. How do we know if it's true? We see if it corresponds to reality. Does the claim correspond to reality? What's the evidence that it corresponds to reality? Even if it was false, we would know by testing whether the claim corresponds to reality. Now that we know the claim corresponds to reality, does that claim cohere with other claims, or does it contradict them? In other words, does this claim or theory have counter-arguments or counterexamples that it cannot explain? So what we're looking for here is, does any of the evidence contradict this claim? Does any of the evidence point to a different claim, a different theory, a different conclusion? If not, then it is coherent. If this claim corresponds to reality and it doesn't contradict any other, let's say, laws of physics or what we know about the solar system or astronomy, if it doesn't contradict anything else that we know is true, then this claim is coherent. Now, is this claim practical? In other words, can we use this truth? Well, yes. For example, in weather patterns or airline paths, satellite and cell reception, etc. We can use this information for all kinds of things. It is practical. So, can't we all just get along? There's 3 theories that are involved here. Well, what is the basis of truth? We have to start there. What is the basis of truth? Reality, which is correspondence. But we know that if something is true, we're also going to have consistency, coherence, or usefulness, pragmatism. So the pragmatic theory says that something is true if it's useful, but that's not quite accurate. What we need to ask is, do we test the Earth is round by its usefulness? Well, we know that the Earth is round. That's true, but it's not true because that's a useful piece of information. No, its usefulness is a nice consequence or effect, but it is not the basis of truth. Sometimes truths are inconvenient at first. For example, gravity and a space launch, right? Gravity is kind of in the way, right? It's an obstacle to be overcome when you're trying to launch a rocket into outer space. Later, we may turn inconvenient actually into useful. For example, we use gravity to make satellites orbit, which lets us use cell phones, for example. But in the end, we're asking what makes it true. The truth comes from its correspondence to reality, not its usefulness. Now, let's ask about coherence theory. Coherence theory says that a claim is true if and only if that claim does not contradict any other claims in a system. Well, that's nice. We want coherence, but is it the basis of truth? Let's ask, is it the basis for truth and a test for truth? Well, all truth must be logically consistent and not contradictory, but coherence is an effect of correspondence. Coherence is a test for truth. We test whether something is true by seeing if this claim contradicts any other evidence or any other truths, right? So we claim that the Earth is a sphere. Does that contradict what we know about gravity or what we know about astronomy? We want to test truth with coherence. Even though coherence is a test for truth, that does not mean that it is the basis of truth. The basis of truth is still correspondence. Coherence is an effect of correspondence, and it is a test for truth. Truth coheres because of correspondence. In other words, if a claim corresponds to reality, it will, as a consequence, be logically coherent and consistent. For example, even though Newton's physics were coherent, they did not correspond to reality and needed to be updated by Einstein. A claim can be consistent in a system, but does the whole set or system actually correspond to reality? The conclusion that we want to draw is in asking, are the three theories just a matter of opinion and perspective? Well, what's the difference between opinion and knowledge, right? Knowledge we want to define as justified true belief. What is justification? Well, justification is the evidence, proof, or the basis of the truth. All right, so we can have a belief, or also known as an opinion. We can have a belief and an opinion that doesn't have good justification, and then if it's true, it's really just a coincidence. Let's say I bet on who's going to win the Super Bowl. I say this team is going to win. Team A is going to win the Super Bowl. Well, if I base that belief off of, let's say, a flip of the coin, well, that's not good justification for that belief. If that belief turns out to be true, that still doesn't make it knowledge. I didn't know that team was going to win. It was just a lucky guess. So when we talk about knowledge, the difference between knowledge and opinion, knowledge has justification. Justification is evidence, proof, the basis for truth. If an opinion is true without justification, it's just luck, a lucky guess. But if it is true and we have good justification, then we have knowledge. Now, what's the application of that? Well, critical thinking tests whether claims are true, in other words, correspond to reality, by assessing whether the justification is good or bad. What if the pragmatic theory was true? Well, pragmatism says if it's useful, it's true. What does true even mean here? How do we test the justification for this claim? Are we asking if pragmatism corresponds to reality? Then we'd just be affirming correspondence theory. When we say if it's useful, it's true, are we asking if pragmatism is useful? That's circular reasoning fallacy. The implications here, things like slavery and oppression are useful, so that means they're true, that means they're good. Newtonian physics was useful, so it was true. Actually, not all of it was true. It needed to be updated by Einstein. There were things about it that were wrong. Newton and Einstein can't both be correct. Which one corresponds to reality? Newton and Einstein are equally useful, but which one is true? In a similar way, freedom and slavery are both useful, but which one is actually good? That's a different question. That's asking about correspondence to reality. What if coherence theory was true? Well, that means so long as you're consistent, your beliefs are true. For example, imperialism is consistent within the belief system of ancient Rome and older British Empire. Slavery was consistent within enslaving societies. Oppression, terrorism, etc. are consistent within many cultures, even today. Newton's gravitational theories were consistent, but they turned out to be partially false because they didn't correspond to reality. So in summary, a claim is true if it corresponds to reality. That's correspondence theory. That's what truth is. Truth is correspondence to reality. If it's true, sooner or later we will see that a true claim coheres. In other words, it's consistent with other truths. So we can test truths with logical coherence. But coherence is not the basis of truth, so coherence theory is incorrect. But don't mix up cause, correspondence, and effect, coherence. Remember, correspondence is the cause of coherence. It's not the other way around. So we still have correspondence theory as the basis of truth, and it does involve coherence, but coherence is not the basis of truth. It's an effect. A true claim is practical. That's another effect of correspondence theory. Something is true if it corresponds to reality, and if it corresponds to reality, then it coheres and it's practical. It may even be inconvenient at first, but truth is always more useful than falsehood. Remember, in the end, that knowledge is justified true belief, and critical thinking investigates good or bad justification. Is truth created or discovered? Well, let's have a brief overview. Truth is discovered, and applications are created. We discover truth so we can measure whether our ideas are good. Based on our discoveries, we create solutions, but we do not create truths. For example, based on science, we create technology. Based on info about the situation, we create a response. If truth is only perspective or opinion, then it does not really exist. We could do literally anything and it would be fine. Proximity to truth is the measure of progress, not mere change. For example, racism versus your favorite color, right? If you change your favorite color, that's change, but that's not progress or growth or improvement. But if we have slavery and racism and then we progress past that until we have no racism, that is progress because we are measuring our current state against the truth as a goal, and we get closer to the goal. Objectivism versus relativism is an important distinction here. Objectivism says that truth is discovered and application is created. Relativism says that truth is created. Let's dig in. If truth corresponds to reality, then do we discover or create reality? For example, we discover that the earth is round. Then we create applications. Another example, we discover gravity, then create spaceships. We discover slavery is wrong, then create laws protecting freedom. We discover facts that help us solve problems at work, then create solutions. Which solutions work best, let's say, in the workplace, or when we're talking about politics and laws, right? Which solutions work best? Which public policies or laws or politicians are going to be best? Well, we start by collecting data to discover facts. Based on facts, we create solutions. We try some solutions to discover data about the results, right? We try it out. What's the effect? Well, we observe the effect. We discover more information after we try the solution. And then, based on that new information, we create improved solutions, and the cycle continues forever. Like in scientific progress. We discover something, we try it out, we observe the findings, and we learn something else, and we try something out, and we just keep going. In other words, we discover truth when a claim corresponds to reality. Then we create applications. For example, science discovers reality, then technology creates applications. Here's some questions I often get. Doesn't each person create their own reality and truth? Well, no. People create applications. People discover the reality about their situation or themselves, then create choices or solutions. People make bad choices if their opinions aren't based on truth with good justification. Critical thinking helps us make good choices based on good reasons. Since each person creates their own solution based on what works, isn't that creating truth? Isn't that pragmatism? Well, no. We create solutions based on truths we discover beforehand. Then we create updated solutions based on our discovery of results. In the end, remember this. We discover truth, then create applications. We can get into some complicated question and answer, but it's all going to point back to discovering truth and creating applications. Media bias. Here's an example of some raw information. At 11:30 a.m., a large pickup truck was involved in a multi-vehicle crash. The driver of the pickup truck sustained minor injuries. No one else was injured, Driving conditions were muddy. The collision occurred off of the road. Onlookers report that all vehicles except the pickup truck were totaled. So what happened? Stop and interpret the information for yourself. Just think about that information that I just gave you. What do you think happened? Create a picture or a narrative in your mind. How are you going to interpret that information? What about a picture? Will a picture help? Let's add some more information. Here's a picture of the totaled cars. You think you know what happened when you hear this event, let's say, on the news. But then you do your own research, and here's the big picture. Here's the full event. Sure, there's a pickup truck involved in a multi-vehicle accident or a multi-vehicle crash, but it was all on purpose. It wasn't a car accident on the freeway. It was an entertainment venue. This is an example of framing. It's easy to spin a story to get people to think what you want them to think. Is this wrong? Well, it depends. Let's just quickly recap from other videos. Remember that the difference between manipulation and honest persuasion. Manipulation deceives others for personal gain, while honest persuasion shares wisdom for the other person's benefit. Also remember, what are the parts of persuasion? Hint, T-E-L. Ethos, or trust, pathos, emotion, and logos, logic. These two sort of tools, ethos, pathos, logos, and manipulation versus honest persuasion, are always going to be relevant when we are using critical thinking skills. So keep those in mind. Now, correspondence theory says a proposition is true if it corresponds to reality. We want to know truth, so we want to know what really happened. What did really happen? Well, at 11:30 a.m., a large pickup truck was involved in a multi-vehicle crash, like we already said. The driver of the pickup truck sustained minor injuries. Let's add that, right? Etc. This is just a report of the raw facts. But is this what really happened? Just this raw information? Is that what really happened? We cannot separate facts from interpretation, as if interpretation is not real and facts are. We might be tempted to divide things like this. Fact: at 11:30 a.m., a large pickup truck was involved in a multi-vehicle crash. Interpretation: a monster truck drove over cars to entertain people. Which is true? Which corresponds to reality? Well, both are true. Both are real. We need both fact and interpretation, so-called fact and so-called interpretation, to tell the whole story and to know, so-called, what really happened. Here's another example. 8:46:40 Eastern Standard Time. Flight 11 crashes at roughly 466 miles per hour into the north face of the North Tower of the World Trade Center between floors 93 and 99. People at the scene know what really happened, right? A plane crashed into the World Trade Tower. Later, we learn terrorists attacked. So, which of these is what really happened, facts, and which is interpretation? Which one is a fact and which one is interpretation? The plane crash or terrorists attack? There isn't a clear divide between fact, so-called, and interpretation. Both really happened, and the interpretation helps us see what really happened even more than just the raw data. Hopefully, the news media will give us objective interpretations of what really happened that report truth and reality. We need the help of people with more information to understand the full story and the meaning of the event. Otherwise, we wouldn't know that the first event was a monster truck rally and the second event was a terrorist attack. We might think both were pure accidents. In fact, I had actually just visited the World Trade Center a few months earlier. I remember that day on September 11th, 2001. I remember seeing on the news a plane crash into the World Trade Tower. And I remember asking, what's happening? And I didn't actually have the answer until later that day or even maybe later that week. I didn't know what happened. So just seeing it for myself and having the raw information did not answer what really happened. I wanted to know what really happened. And we didn't get all the information until later to help us interpret what we were seeing before us. I distinctly remember the first time I saw the plane crash, I thought that it was an accident. But I was wrong, because it's a wrong interpretation, and that's not what really happened. Sure, there was a plane crash, but what really happened was not only a plane crash, but a terrorist attack. But here's where media bias comes in. We all have biases. What is a bias? Our knowledge helps us interpret the world and understand more fully the meaning of events and what really happened. This knowledge is sometimes called bias, worldview, opinion, or beliefs. Of course, if it is justified true belief, then it is knowledge. If our knowledge is accurate and corresponds to reality, it is true, and it helps us interpret new events accurately. If our opinion is false and does not correspond to reality, then we will interpret new events inaccurately. The closer your bias corresponds to reality, so in other words, the closer your general beliefs and knowledge correspond to reality, the more truth you will learn, because it helps you see reality more clearly and interpret what's going on. It helps you know what really happened. The further your bias is from reality, the more your false opinion grows. Bias is compounding, whether it's good bias or bad bias, whether your beliefs are true or false. It is compounding. When the news media or your family or your friends report an event and their interpretation, they use their bias to convey what they think really happened. Good biases, interpretations, belief systems, and worldviews highlight the meaning of the event and the truth of what really happened. Bad interpretations disguise truth and lead to false beliefs. So if your bias is wrong, are we cursed to go further and further into ignorance as our ignorance continues to be compounded? No. Enter critical thinking. Critical thinking helps us sort through multiple different biases or theories or claims or opinions to figure out which one more closely corresponds to reality, which belief is true, i.e., which one is more objective, which one has the best justification, evidence, or support. We also ask, are they engaged in manipulation or honest persuasion? Remember, manipulation deceives others for personal gain, and honest persuasion shares wisdom for the other person's benefit. We also ask, how are they using ethos, pathos, and logos, or trust, emotion, and logic, to either disguise the truth in manipulation or highlight the meaning of what really happened? Also, what logical fallacies or dirty tricks are leading to false beliefs? Also see the readings and other videos related to logical fallacies and dirty tricks. Here's some takeaways. Truth is correspondence to reality. Bias is when our opinion influences how we interpret reality. This can help or hinder understanding what really happened. We check the accuracy of our bias and the bias of others with critical thinking. Also, we grow in critical thinking by loving truth and wisdom more than pride and power, being honest, humble, and fair-minded, and practicing critical thinking tools. That's all I have for you in this video. Be sure to look at my other videos as well.